So, SMO. Now, I am a big believer that somebody that your first introduction to something is more important than anything else. So I try to put together sessions that don't assume any knowledge, right? So in this session, I'm not necessarily going to be teaching PowerShell as much as I'm teaching SMO. So there will be some PowerShell stuff because I want to start, because if somebody just has done a little bit of PowerShell and they know the syntax, then they'll be just fine with SMO for the most part. But I wanted to really explain the concepts because I still remember how hard it was for me to get my mind around some of these things. So, and I think that's really important is you get guys that have been doing this 15, 20 years and they forget what it's like to be a beginner. So, and BI is the worst about that, right? You say, well, what's a KPI? And they go, well, it's a key performance indicator. You're like, okay, what's that? And they're like, well, it's an indicator that tells you the key performance. I'm like, really, man? You just rearranged the tautology on me? So, so I don't believe in that kind of stuff. So if you guys have any questions, keep them to yourselves. I don't care. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead and shout them out if you have any questions. So, because who knows, somebody at home may have the same question, and I either know the answer or I don't. I'm not afraid to say I have no idea, dude. It's just in the code. Do it. So, all right. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get on with it. So y'all can see my screen all right, right? You see the PowerShell?
It looks good.
Excellent. I couldn't hear Adrian when he just said that.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Yep, so good.
And I have no idea if y'all's voices are coming through on my recording. So we're going to find out. Alrighty. So SMO, Server Management Objects, and they've been around for many years now, and their predecessor was DMO, right? I think that was Dynamic Management Objects, but don't quote me on that. And it was sketchy at best. And SMO comes along as you know, like DMO 2.0, and it's much more well thought out. Now, still isn't super well thought out, but it's much more well thought out, right? And I think it was really, really buggy when PowerShell came out. And these bugs had managed to stay around for a long time, I think, because in order to use it before, you had to do VB script. And VB script is just murder to try to work with. Have either of you guys done anything significant in VB script?
It's been a few years. It's been a long time.
Yeah. So when I teach beginning PowerShell, I usually show like a PowerShell command to like write something to a file. And then I show the VB script, which is like 3/4 of a page. And, you know, so I'll be honest, I didn't bother with SMO before PowerShell because I couldn't get my mind around the VB script, right? I'm an admin, I'm not a dev, right? Okay, well now I am. But, and even now I still look at VB script and go, nope, 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 right? So it's my firm belief that a lot of SMO was allowed to be buggy because only the elite guys were using it. But now PowerShell comes along and makes it so much easier, and now everybody's using it, right? And I think that exposed a lot of the bugs. So they've been forced to up their game a little bit, but somehow not their documentation. Okay, so with that in mind, SMO, Server Management Objects. What it's for is it is for managing and auditing your SQL boxes in code, flat out. Now, by auditing, that's anything you want to query, right? Not auditing in the sense of, hey, there's an auditor here and he wants to find out how many sysadmins are on the box, but just anything you query in your environment is an audit, right? So that type of auditing, everything from everything you talked about earlier, Adrian, with the new features, right?
Yeah.
To tons of stuff, and also being able to actually do stuff. So what I'm going to do today is take you from the very beginning in SMO all the way to being able to get different types of information and being able to actually change some things. I think we're changing things. Yes, we're changing things. So the first thing you got to do is you've got to load the assembly. Now, an assembly is just a fancy .NET way of saying a DLL, right? I've got to load the DLL into this session. And that's an important distinction. You're loading it into this PowerShell session. You are not loading it into memory for everything to use, right? So if I have a PowerShell session and I load in this assembly, if I open up a different PowerShell session, that will not be available to it until I load the assembly. Now, I'm going to load with partial name. And all you do is say, reflection.assembly, load with partial name, give it the name, Microsoft SQL Server SMO. And I'm saying out null here. It usually just outputs the location of the DLL, right? And says loaded yes. Well, we don't need that. We know it's there. So load with partial name is a bit of a religious debate in the PowerShell community, because the PowerShell team themselves and all the PowerShell experts say don't load with partial name anymore. They want you to load with the full name down here doing just a load. But we don't, that's really for version conflicts, right? You have different versions of an assembly in the GAC, and you want to load a specific one because it's got specific functionality. But in SQL, we really don't have that problem that often, right? I mean, we've usually only got one version of SQL on our box. So we've only got one version of SMO on there. And even if we have two versions, we usually want the later one anyway, which is the one that's going to come up by default, right? So it's not a big deal to us, but here's why it's a big deal for us to use load with partial name instead of load, because here is the full load syntax with the public key token and all that. And what you have to do is you have to go there, you have to go to the folder location, and you have to right click on the DLL and go into details and pull all this information out of there and put, it's ridiculous, only to like move it to another box and have it be on a different version. So now your script doesn't even work. It's not worth it, right? So definitely load the assembly with partial name, and I think you'll be happier. If you run into conflicts, I put this here, but since PowerShell has come out, like in, what was it, 05? That's 2005, not SQL 05. But maybe it was close to, anyway, since PowerShell came out, I've never run into a conflict, ever. So I don't think it's going to happen often at all. Now, something else I should tell you about this session here is not only am I going to try to explain things as basically as I can, but I'm also going to really, really pound a few things into your head. So I'm going to repeat myself many times on certain topics, because sometimes you need to get things pounded into your head. And if you're getting tired of hearing it, that means it's working and you won't forget it. So let's move on to the next script, and let's start getting into some actual SMO. I need to be on number 2. There we go. So we're going to start with basic connecting. Now, what do I start with every single time? I load the assembly. Every single time. You can't use the assembly if it's not loaded into memory. Easy enough. Now, you also create a variable as an SMO server object. So I'm creating a variable here, and I'm not going to teach you this because I'm not going to teach PowerShell basics, but I'm going to create it as a new object, and it's going to be Microsoft SQL Management SMO Server. Okay, it took me quite a while to understand that, and I've loaded all of these scripts with lots of comments so that we can upload it, and you'll more or less know what's going on. But every variable in PowerShell is an object, right? They're all a specific data type and they have an object, or they are an object. So let's take a look at this so you'll really understand that we're not doing anything different here when we create this as this type of object, right? So let's go to, actually we can probably do that here. Yeah, so I'm using Sapiens PowerShell Studio, and I've loved this tool for a long time. It's a great editor. It's not free, but it's a great editor, and I highly recommend it. There are a couple free ones out there, including ISE. I've never been a fan of ISE, but you know, whatever. If you don't have the money for this, maybe you should go with that, right? So we're just going to run this script, and for here, I'm going to right-click and say, I don't want to right-click. I want to do that and say Run in Console. When I switch over to the console, now this automatically did a dot sourcing for me. So now if I want to get the value of that A variable, it's 5. But if I want to pipe that to a GM and get member on that thing, you'll see that it is a type int32 because it's clearly a number, right? And look, these guys have methods. There are no properties for an integer, right? It's the number it is, it's the value it is, but you can do things to it. So you can convert it to double or to int16 and so on and so on. So you can do things to it. But you notice how there's no substring or end string or replace or anything like that because it's a number, right? So let's look at B. B is hello. And if I do a GM on B, you'll see that it's coming through as a string because it is a string. And so it's got a load of methods, and here's remove and pad left and index of and all of that. And then it's got one property, which is length, which I think is so named, right? Now, should I talk about the difference between a method and a property? Sure, why not? So a property is basically an adjective, right? It describes this object. And this is a very important concept in object-oriented programming, which is more or less what PowerShell is, but these objects definitely are, is with everything being an object, it's just like, you know, I think everybody's favorite example is a car, right? A car is definitely an object. And objects have properties. So the car has a size, it has a width, it has a height, it has weight, it has a color, it has horsepower, it has mileage, it has MPG, it has all of these different properties, just thousands and thousands of properties. These are things, these are questions you can ask about the car, right? Does the car this, does the car that, does the car that, has it that, has it that, it's got a certain type of braking system, and so on and so on and so on, right? But there are also things you can do with the car or do to the car, right? You can drive it forward, you can drive it back, you can put it in park, you can put it in neutral and coast and push it, you could stand on top of it and take a sledgehammer to it. So you can do things to it and you can do things with it, right? So those are verbs. So your methods are your verbs. These are things that you can do to the object, and the properties are the things that you can find out about the object. So the only thing you can find out about a string is how long it is. Fine. Because if you think about it, what other would there be, right? Would you say count the capital letters in there for me? But what if it's a string of numbers, right? So it doesn't really make sense. But you can do all kinds of things to it, right? You can remove things, you can replace things, you can split it on a certain character, and so on and so on. So this object that is a string has different properties than this object that is a number. What was the last one? Oh yeah, the last one was, let's do this. Let's say $C GM. Now this was, oh, not $C, $C. $C. Come on, man. $C GM. Now this one is a list of files. supposed to be. Oh, I'm in the wrong folder. Sorry about that. So this is interesting. You're going to like this. Yeah, so I should have this in the, sorry, one sec.
What?
Okay, there's nothing here. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to show you guys something really cool. I didn't mean to do that. Not very many people know this kind of thing exists. So I'm in the folder right now for my beginning SMO class, and I want to open up a PowerShell window to there. So I come in here and just say PowerShell.exe. My network is starting to lag a little bit, and it automatically opens up a PowerShell window to that. And you can do the same thing with command. So I can come here and just say command. Yeah, for some reason my network is being really laggy right now. And there you go. So you can open up a command window there too. So not very many people know about that cute little shortcut. So
Yeah, I didn't know about that. That's cool.
when I'm here, I'll say .whack O2 tab, and I need to .source that, don't I? There we go. Okay. C, GM. There we go. So now I've got a list of files in here, and of course it is system.io file info. And imagine that this object doesn't have the same properties and methods that the other two do, right? Imagine that this one has things like extension and full name and is read only and last access time and name and base name and so on and so on and so on, right? So and what kinds of things can you do? You can copy it somewhere, you can decrypt it, I suppose, you can delete it, and so on, right? So the point of all this is that every variable in PowerShell is a specific type of object, and that specific type of object has different parameters. I mean, has different properties and methods, right? So with that in mind, you can see now that we're creating this guy right here with different properties and methods by giving it an object type, by creating a new object type of SMO server. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we get there. We should be able to just say SRV. I think that's right. And it's going to take this a minute because it's spinning up a lot of stuff right now, right? So give it a few seconds and it'll pop up here. There we go. So look at what this came up with. This came up with all of these things right here. We've got audit level and backup directory and browser service account, cluster name, comparison style, whatever that is, right? Default log location, and all of this information that we automatically get because when I created this new object right here and assigned it to the variable, it automatically connected to the local instance and pulled the info. You don't have to pass it in a box. Most of the time you're going to, right? Because you're not going to go on that box and use SMO. You're going to stay where you are and you're going to use SMO, right? Or you're going to go to one box and SMO to a bunch of other boxes in PowerShell, right? But if you don't pass it anything, it will automatically connect to the local instance and assign that and all of its values to a variable. So here again, we've got login mode is mixed, and this is all just information about the instance, right? Databases right here, you can see I've got a list of databases here. So this is just a list of databases. I've got a list of endpoints. And where are we here? And something that we're going to be very interested here in just a second is the connection context. And you can see here that it connected to my laptop BindyCon using integrated security and all of the other thing with the application name of SQL Management. Really? SQL Management? Sure, why not? So by default, these are all the settings. And I think that's all for that one. Yeah, so I can get the exact same thing here. And that's probably why that's taken so long, because I'm doing it twice. Let me copy that. Let me put that out. There we go. So you can do the same thing with remote or local servers. And here's how you pass in a server name. I can do the same thing with a named instance. And what you're going to want to be interested in the most is this is the preferred method, is assigning that to a variable and then putting the variable there. So that means that now you've got a list of servers, right? And inside a cursor, you connect to one server, you assign the variable to it, to the name, and then you connect to that instance and you do your stuff. Then you move on to the next one, blah, 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 right? So, and that's really where the power of SMO shines, because, you know, you could say, okay, some of this seems like it's a huge pain, because why would I want to do that when I can go into Management Studio and do this, right? I think the same thing every time I start a new SMO script, because I'm like, God, this is such a pain. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And it is a pain when you're first starting and you're learning the idiosyncrasies of it, and it really is quite idiosyncratic. But once you get that written, and you're doing this against 100 boxes, where you ordinarily would have had to do it by hand, then you go, and only then you go, oh, I need to get started on my next one, right? So yes, SMO is a learning curve, but it's more than worth it once you start getting some of these things done, right? And I'm going to show you some things today that are actually going to make it really worth it, even if you're doing it on a single box, because it's not just multiple boxes, right? When I teach a session on being an enterprise DBA, and one of the big things that I teach, and it's a pre-con, so it's a full day session, and I still run out of time, right? I can't teach you to be an enterprise DBA in a day, but one of the things that I teach you is to change your thinking about your enterprise. So I don't want you to be a DBA in an enterprise with 100 servers, with 1,000 servers, right? You'll never get anything done. I want you to be okay, instead of, let me do it like this. What's the most amount of servers that either one of you, the most amount of databases that either one of you guys have ever had on a server?
300-400, maybe?
300-400, okay.
There or thereabouts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And that's a lot, right?
Mm.
So if you have to do anything with those, you have to connect to the first one, do it, connect to the second one, do it, connect to the third one, do it, so on and on, right? So cursors become your friend, right? People always say, oh, cursors, no, cursors. But cursors are there for a reason. Cursors are extremely useful. As a DBA, I love cursors because they're very useful, mostly in admin stuff, right?
It's funny.
Now,
How often we have this conversation, Aid? We say it all the time.
Many times.
People are bashing cursors. Don't use cursors. Don't use cursors. And you think, well, they can
Actually,
be great.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
no,
want to execute something.
Don't use them.
Each thing, yeah.
Don't use them where they shouldn't be used, right? Don't use them inappropriately, and that's where people lose sight of the fact, right? So when you're doing admin work like that, you put that in a cursor, and then you have that cursor go through all of the databases and do your stuff for you, period, right? But that'll only take you so far. Like I show in that session, let's say that you want to add a user account to every single database. Hell, that's easy, right? It's the same code, right? But what if you want to like alter an SP that's in every single one of the databases, and that SP is like 2 pages long, and it's got dynamic SQL in there and all that? Well, you would have to put that in a string object, right? And you'd have to you'd have to double quote all of the quotes and so on and so on. And inside of there, you may have to double some of them because and it gets untenable really, really fast, right? So that cursor method, that T-SQL cursor method is only going to take you so far before you have to break out into something else, right? So enter, of course, PowerShell, right? You could put that alter sp command in a file. You can connect to the box, go to the databases, cycle through each one of them, and call that one for each one of them, blah, 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 and it's easy as hell. It takes you, what, 2 minutes, right, to write that from scratch? It's absolutely nothing. And next time it'll take you 10 seconds because all you got to do is change the path, right? So when you're doing stuff like that, PowerShell becomes really, really powerful, and SMO can take you a long way to that. So let me ask you something. If you've got a cursor that cursors through all the databases on a single server, how hard is that for you to do if you're doing it in PowerShell? Like that, right? Easy as hell, right? But that's only a single box. So how many servers do you have if you've only got one box with, say, 17,000 databases on it, which is the most databases I've ever had on a server? You got one server, right? And actually, they were identical databases. So everything I did on that server, I had to do 17,000 times. That's when I started to learn how to code. So what if you've got 17,000 databases, each with one database on it? If you're doing it in PowerShell, what's the difference? It's an extra level of a cursor, right? It's an extra loop. You got a for each for servers and a for each for databases, right? Well, what do you call a loop with only one item in it? A loop.
Pointless.
No, you call it a loop, right? So you always code for multiple servers. You always code for multiple databases. And if you only have to do something to one, well, it's a loop with one item in it, right?
That's good. I like that. That's
a good idea.
It's really good thinking, isn't it?
So if I can do something, so if now I've got this script that I've written in PowerShell, and it goes through all of the databases on a single server, and say puts an SP out there, right? Or adds a new login to all of them. But I wrote it so that it'll go against multiple servers. So let's say now I have to do the same thing to every server. I need to give every I need to put a new user on every single server in my shop, and I got, say, 500 servers, right? And every one of them has between 4 and 17,000 databases on it. So all I got to do is put that server. All I got to do is pull that list of servers from somewhere into my cursor, right? And the PowerShell runs through it, right? But it's the exact same amount of work for me, isn't it? So since all I had to do was call the script, is there a difference between me running this on one server and me running this against 500 servers? Not really, no. So my time, because it's not my time, right? Even if it takes that thing 4.5 hours to finish, it's not 4.5 hours of my time, right? I set it to run and I go do something else, right? So with that in mind, is there a difference between managing an environment with one server with 17,000 databases on it and an enterprise with 17,000 servers with one database on it? Not really, right? So you really only have in your head one server in your environment because you're managing everything with scripts and everything else you just don't care about, right? So if you stop thinking of your environment as this disjointed, everything is separate thing, and start looking at it as, and instead of these disparate objects, start looking at it as an umbrella type of thing, right? This is my environment, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. Now you're going to start getting this this enterprise mentality that you stop treating everything separately and you start making things simpler, right? By coding everything to multiple servers and multiple databases, and then you're just changing the names of things and running the exact same script you ran before, right? And it's going to be very easy. I managed 1,000 servers by myself like that for a year. I mean, think about that. A single DBA, 1,000 servers. That's not bad. And I always went to lunch on time. And I always went home on time and everything. So yes, that is why you're going to go through the trouble to learn SMO. And that's why it's a big deal. Because it allows you to do things on scale that you just simply can't do easily any other way. I've seen guys, one last story, and then I swear to God I'll get back to SMO. But I wanted you to understand the mentality behind why SMO is worth it, right? So I taught this. I taught this in a session once, in a pre-con of about 4 or 5 years ago. And this guy comes up to me the next year when I went to that SQL SAT, and he says, Sean, I want you to know that I took what you said and I did it, man. I made my entire environment one shop, and it is gorgeous. I can't wait to show you what I'm doing. And I was like excited for him. I'm like, yeah, man, I can't. Yes, show me. And so he pulls up his box and he opens up Management Studio and he goes, look, and he's got like 400 linked servers on his laptop. And all of these SPs that he's written to go to call that go out there and dynamic SQL and pull all this information in and put it into tables, and I just went, well, good luck. You got the concept, but the execute, but you didn't really listen to everything I said, right? So okay, let's get back to SMO. I had somewhere else to go with that, and I lost my train of thought. So maybe it'll come back to me. But if you've ever seen one of my sessions before, you know I digress a lot, right? But I like to think that it's on topic most of the time. Okay, so we were talking about why this is going to be why putting this in a parameter is going to be useful, right? Because you're always going to be cycling through boxes. All right, let me. No, I'm not going to save that one. I'm going to go to O3 now. Now, it's not always going to be the case that you can connect with Windows authentication. So we're going to connect with SQL Auth now. Now, what do we start with here? We start with loading the assembly, because you can't use it unless it's loaded into the session. It's loaded into the session, right? Not general computer memory for everybody's use. It's only loaded into this session. Now, regardless of what I do here, don't ever keep passwords in plain text in scripts. It is a bad idea. And keep it encrypted in a database, decrypt it when it's back in the script, and this way, this just becomes a call to get the script, to get the password, right? And then you can put it in clear text there. But if somebody were to grab this, now they've got the SA password, right? And yeah, you guys can go ahead and have the password to my laptop. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm sure we've never seen a SA password in plain text before, have we?
Yeah, right? Yeah. Okay, so we start with loading the assembly. Oh, it's not going anywhere. Okay, so then we create our variable as an SMO server type. Now we're going to set the connection context. And I believe I may have mucked something up a little bit. Nope, not there. Let me go back to number 2 and see if I forgot to do something. New object, there. No, I guess not. Okay. I guess that's coming then, because I know there's something coming, and I thought it would have been before now. All right. Go back to here. There we go. Okay, so now you just set the connection context, because when I have, let me look at 4, because I'm either going to get into this now or in a minute. Okay, good. So we're exploring. Okay, good. So we'll explore that in a minute when we get to 4. So you set login secure, which means SSPI, right? Windows authentication. You set that to false. You set the login to SA, the password to your password. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and change the application name to SMO from PowerShell. Why not? That's what's the application name is what's going to show up in the application name in like sys processes and sysexec requests, right? So I like to change that so that if anything I write ever hangs or causes performance problems, it's really easy for me to see what it is, right?
Yeah,
I do
that's
that.
a really handy thing, that, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
we have this problem all the time. We troubleshooting things. You go in there, you look at processes, and it comes from .NET Provider.
Yeah.
So
It's
frustrating.
useless, isn't it? It's useless.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
When I write SIS packages, I do that as well, because in the connection you can change the application name if you go into advanced properties, and I always put like the server name, the table name, what it's doing, maybe even the name of the workflow, right? So I put the information in, the name of the package, the name of the workflow and stuff. So I always put that stuff in there so that if it hangs or causes problems or blocks something or is involved in a deadlock, I can see exactly what it was that was causing that problem. So I always put that stuff in my SIS package connections as well. Okay, so it's very simple here. We've just changed the connection info, and I believe we're going to talk about that in more detail right now. So exploring the object model, there is a lovely screenshot of the object model. I always think it's interactive when I go there and I click on it and it's just an image. So now the object model is very easy to visualize in your head, right? Just think of Management Studio. You start with the instance, and then you've got databases, security, job server, so on and so on and so on, right? And then under there, you've got the list of databases. Under the databases, you've got tables, programmability, views, SPs, functions, so on and so on, right? Well, that's the object model. That's the layered object model, right? The hierarchy of the objects. And the hierarchy of the objects, if you know SQL at all, makes a lot of sense. Well, that's what this is, right? This is just the hierarchy of objects. In fact, let's go there real quick just to show you what I'm talking about. This is probably going to bring up every other thing I ever had open. Yep, so I'm going to open this like that instead. And I'm using Edge. I'm sure Microsoft will forgive me. So here's the SMO object model. And again, we've got the server, we've got backup devices, databases, and underneath databases, we have a whole list of things as well, right? Log files, partitions, we've got rules, and so on, right? So stored procedures, and on and on. So that's the object model, and it can be really useful if you can't find something, right? If you don't know where something is in SMO, it can be really useful to help you find something. Now, let me come back here. So we've got our assembly loaded, we've got our new object created, and now let's just do a get member on that and see the types of things that we have available to us. Let's run that guy in the console. Go to the console, and here we are. So just like we did a GM on those other object types at the beginning of this session, we can do a GM here and see all of the different properties and methods that we have available to us in SMO or in our SMO server object, right? So here's a script method. Here is that connection context right here that we called right there. And underneath there, and you'll see, where are you? There we are. And you'll see that that too is a collection, right? So the connection, you can get the connection context. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here. Here's logins, here's login mode, here's mail, and so on and so on, right? Databases is probably in here somewhere. There we go. There's databases, which is a database collection. So let's go ahead and look at connection context, I believe. Oh, we're going to look at databases first. You know what? Forget that. I want to look at connection context. So I am going to do that instead. So let's look at connection context. I'm going to say srv dot connection context. I'm going to save that. Come back to console, do an up arrow, run that again. And so here's my connection context. There's my my GM that I did. So I've got connection type. I can set batch separator. Where is my, there's my true name, right? There's my true login. And here's my connection string again that all this gets built from. And where is that one that we had a second ago? See, login and password right there. Secure login is true. And for the server instance, remember I didn't specify a server instance, so it connected to dot, which is of course localhost, right? So it uses the, mine just went blank. What am I trying to say?
Local machine.
Yeah, but it's good. Anyway, my mind just went blank. I'll think of it. So we've got all this connection info right here. And that is, again, right here in connection context. Right there. Cool. All right. That is connection context, isn't it? Yeah. So with all of that, let's go ahead and comment these guys out again. And let's look at databases. So to look at databases, you do the same thing as you did with connection context. You say, I want to see server databases, and I want to do a get member on it. And we're just doing SMO gymnastics right now, right? So same thing. My thing's moving really slow again. I've got all these properties. Look how many properties databases have. Lots of methods too. And it, of course, now is an SMO database object. And you can alter the database, and you can see check tables, and you can do deny and drop and discover, and all the properties. Tons of stuff in here. I'm sure database name is in here somewhere, right? It's just name in this case. There we go. Name and stored procedures, which is a collection. You've got recovery model, which is a get right there, as it turns out. Oh, no. There it is. It's a get and a set. We're going to talk about that in a couple minutes. And you got the size and space available. And so tables, you've got all of this information about databases that you don't have for servers, right? Because it's a different type of object. I know. Did I say I was going to pound some things into the ground? All right, let's move on. And let's put some of that into a little bit more useful format, right? Let's query the databases, and let's pull up their name, their size, their data space usage, index space, available space, and put it into a format table. Just to have a little something to look at that's useful. It's going to take it a minute. There we go. So I got a few databases here, and I've got the exact info I was looking for. I'm going to complain about this in a minute, so I'm not going to complain about it now. But this is not that easy to do in T-SQL. To get all of this info into a single result set is not as easy, and it certainly isn't as short, right? Now, you would say, you know, a good question is, how come I would use the SMO instead of using, say, the PowerShell provider, the SQL Server? I can't word today. Instead of using the SQL Server module, right, that comes when you install SQL, right? Well, you actually are, because that just calls SMO on the back end. So you've got all of the same properties and all of the same methods that you do when you call SMO yourself. So you actually are using SMO when you use the provider. You're just, those commandlets are just like SPs that sit on top of SMO, right? And they do all the heavy lifting for you. And even here, right? So this is one thing I meant to talk about earlier, is what is SMO exactly, right? What does it do? How does it get its information in a way that I'm not getting it, right? No way. Absolutely nothing. There is no difference. SMO translates to T-SQL on the back end. And as a matter of fact, you can even trace it. So you can run something like this, and then you can run a profiler or an X event if you want, right? And trace it and see the queries that it's running. So it really just translates into queries on the back end. So there's no backdoor magic or anything, right? It's just running queries. So if you would rather do this, if you would rather do this once and then grab the T-SQL for it and do it in T-SQL from now on, go for it. But you're going to find SMO is very chatty, right? And by chatty, I mean to pull up like some information on databases will take something like 70 queries back and forth per database to get all of the information to put it into a single result set. So SMO can be very chatty. So getting all of that from a trace and putting it into something coherent can be difficult, but it's possible. I've done it many times. Okay. And now let's show you how to do that for a single database, because we did all the databases here, but for a single database, it's actually relatively easy. After databases, you just do square brackets and put the name of the database you're interested in. It's that simple. So let's look at that one. Ah, wow, that's much faster than the other one, isn't it? So now I've got information on a single database. Let me go ahead and get rid of this one because it's confusing me every time I have to decide which one to go to. There we are. So let's comment this one out. And I can do the exact same thing here with a variable. Now I'm showing you this with a variable. Why? Because this is how you may be cycling through databases doing specific things, right? And so here I'm showing you just how to set that to a variable and then do that. Didn't I? I could have sworn I just did that. Oh well. So you can do that with a variable as well, and it works just fine. There we go. Now, what if I want to get a list of specific databases? Well, that's not as straightforward. I mean, it is, but it's not as performant. If I want to do a single table, a single database here, I very easily just pass in that database. But if I want to get a list of databases, like using regex and say everything that starts with the word min, right? Then I can't really put that in square brackets. That doesn't translate into it doesn't accept regex, right? Or a list of things. So what I have to do is I have to pull back all of the databases, and then I have to filter them by that, and then do my select, right? Now I'm doing a select here instead of a format table because I'm showing you how to put it out to a grid view, which is fun, especially when you want to sort it different ways and you don't feel like coding the whole thing. So let's go ahead and run this one. And actually, I do have to run this one in the shell. Oh, look, I've been running it, and I've got the grid right there. So here you go. I've got that one open, and you can sort that. Now, this is what I wanted to complain about a couple minutes ago that I didn't get a chance to complain about, was that these metrics, these numbers are in different metrics, right? This is in megs. These are in K. Really? Really? And there's nothing in SMO, if you go through the documentation, that tells you that. It just says, you know, index space usage. SMO is very poorly documented, especially some of the things you really want to know about. You do a GM on your server object, you look at it and you go, oh, I wonder what that is. And you go over there, you go to the page and it has the name of the object and it shows you how to call it, which you already know how to call it because you know it's a property. And that's it. It doesn't say anything else about it. Or maybe it's tautological, right? It'll say for like a discovery object, right? It'll say discovers. And you're like, really? Really? It discovers? Thanks for that. That's a world of information. So anyway, it's not, they're not very forthcoming with the info sometimes. And there are some things I've been looking up for years and I still have no idea what they do. Okay. Let me clear out some of these windows. There we go. Perfect. Now, yeah, see, here I am complaining about the sizes. Now, you can do a combination of, you can combine things if you want to, right? Let's get a list of all the tables in a specific database. I'm going to pick the Minion database. And I'm going to, and it's the same thing as anything else in like the four dot naming in SQL, right? Server dot instance dot database dot schema dot table, so on and so on and so on, right? So it's the same thing here. I've got my server object. I want to get the list of databases. I want to limit it to the Minion. Inside that Minion database, I want to get a list of the tables, and inside of there, I want to get the name of each table. And I'm just going to print the name of all the tables to the screen. I already saved that, so I should be able to just say up arrow, go, and there's a list of all the tables in the Minion database. Not too bad. I can do the same thing, showing again the exact same thing with indexes. So now I just go tables.indexes.name. And I can pull up a list of all the indexes. That was actually pretty fast. Of course, I'm also staying local too, but okay. Now let's get all the indexes for a single table, since that's probably a little bit more reasonable. Because let's be honest, this doesn't tell me jack, does it? You're going to pull back thousands of indexes, and it's going to, so let me do that. Now, I'm pulling back Minion. Now, look, the same thing holds true, right? I'm limiting the databases to Minion. Now I'm limiting the tables to table properties, .indexes, .script. So now I want to script the tables, or the indexes for that table. So when I come here, did I save that? Yep. So when I come here and hit up, I get an error. It says it can't call a method on a null valued expression. Well, can I just go ahead and say poo on you? So the problem is that it defaults to the DBO schema. And this is in the collector schema. So what I have to do is I have to call this and pass it in the schema. Now I hate this. I hate this, hate it, hate it, hate it. Because this was supposed to be written for DBAs, but you can easily tell that it's written for C# and VB guys. Because the schema comes second. Right? And that's not how DBAs work, right? We do schema.tablename. Now, if you go into Visual Studio and you create a new connection to it and you pull up a list of tables that you want to create a connection for, right? They do the same thing. They've got the table name, and then after the table name, they've got the schema in parentheses, right? That's how I know this was written for programmers. Right? Now, how do you know? And this is one of those things that you may or may not know based off of your experience with PowerShell. So we're going to look at something again, but let's pull this up first. So again, I can limit the table, and I just give it a comma, the schema name, and I'm still back to indexes and script. Let me make sure and save that. So now when I come up here, there, I've got the script for all of the indexes for this one specific table, right? Create index, create non-clustered index, so on and so on. Okay, now I promised that we were going to do something, and I'm going to pull a get member on my server object again because this matters. We've got, I've already forgotten what I was doing. Let me go back to my script. Yeah, okay. So when I come here to, if I can find it, oh, I got to go to databases. That's the problem. That's why I can't find it. Where are you? Come here. Databases. I hope this is it. Where? Let's see. Table collections, get. Maybe it's a table collection instead I need to get. Let me see. Maybe it's a table collection. I thought I showed you this. Anyway, I can show you on something else. So you'll notice that for all of these properties, that they have either a get and a set, or just a get. And sometimes they have more than one thing listed over here. I'm looking for one that has more than one thing. Let me go up a level because I know logins does. Yeah, I'll get my act together here in a second. I think. Okay, so logins right here. Right there. So if I do logins here, I've got a login collection, and if I say down to the bottom, there we go. Dot logins GM. There we go. So for the create method. There we go. So we got the create method here. And you notice how it says void create with empty parens, and it says void create with a string of a password, and then it's got void create with secure string password, and then void create with string password comma SQL Server something, right? I can't tell what that is right now. So it's got all of these different ways that you can call it, right? That's called overload. That's called an overloaded method. And what that means is that method can be called with different sets of parameters. So the create can be called with no parameters. It can be called with just the password passed in as a string, with a password passed in as a secure string, and so on and so on and so on, right? There are several overloads for the create method for this guy, right? So it's the same thing. Anytime you see these different methods, or anytime you see different ways to call this thing, that means that it's overloaded, and that's an object-oriented term. And I'm going to say it again. All it really means is you can call it with a number of different parameters, right? Sometimes they only have one overload, right? Sometimes it's enable. You can only call that one way, passing it no parameters. It doesn't take any parameters ever. So does get hash code, right? Doesn't take any parameters. But something like, let's find something else here, grant, it needs a SQL Server SMO object permission set, and then the name of a permission, a string argument of grantee names, and so on and so on, right? So, and then of course, here's another overload, and you'd need to pipe that to a format list to get all the overloads, right? So now the get and the set, anything that has a get and a set means that it can be changed. Anything that just has a get means that it can only be read. So that's clearly only going to count for properties. So the asymmetric key, you can read the current key and you can set the current key, right? The create date, of course you can't set the date of when a database was created, right? Of course you can't. You do that. How do you set the database create date? Anybody know? You create the database. That's the only way to do it, right? The date last modified, sure, but the default database for a user, of course you can set it, right? So you can either get something, or you can set it, or you can do both. All right, so that's how you pass in this overload. This tables collection has two overloads. One where you pass in the table name, and the other one where you pass in the schema as an afterthought, evidently. Now, I think I can do the same thing. And you notice how this is just building, right? It's the exact same thing. We're just doing it again and again and again and again, right? So I start with my server object. I pull up the database collection. I limit it by the minion database. .tables. I've got my table here, my one table that I want to script. I want to script the indexes, but I only want to script that one index. So it's the exact same thing. And how do you pass in this? How do you pass in the schema of the index? That's a trick question because indexes don't have schemas, right? The trick question. Okay. So I'm going to do this, and I should get a single index scripted. Well, I did. I'm in 4. Oh, you know why? Because that's not the script. I just redid that server call. There we go. This is 04. And then I get that one index scripted, that non-DB name right there. So again, this is just a little bit of gymnastics for you, right? To show you how these commands are put together. But the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? It's just dot, 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 and you limit things the exact same way every single time. Nothing changes. It's just at a different level. And you would expect you would expect that from something like PowerShell, right? Okay. There we go. Now, let's go ahead and do a GM on this guy again, because that's one of the things I'm pounding into your head, is doing a get member on things. And what are we looking for now? We want to look for job server. There you go. So we've got job server right there. And job server, you can get it, and it is just a job server object. Cool. So I'm going to do a get member of job server. And that gives me the property of the job server. And I can, again, I can enumerate jobs, all these methods, right? I can drop jobs by login. Hey, that sounds pretty handy. I'm getting pretty upset with Steve anyway. You're that guy. I'm going home. And all the properties, I can get a list of jobs. And that list of jobs is, again, a job collection, right? I can see login timeouts. I can see all kinds of, I can get the names of jobs and whatnot. So what are we doing here? We're going to get the job names. And this really doesn't change from the last thing we did, right? Instead of connecting to server.databases, we're connecting to server.job server, right? And then we're going to connect to .jobs, and then we're going to connect to, and then we're going to display the name property of all of the jobs. So is that syntax getting boring for you yet? I hope so, because that means you won't forget it. So let's get a list of the jobs. I did it again. I'm right there. Yeah, there we are. Okay, so there's the list. Oh, I bet you anything I've still got that. Yep, that's where that came from. That's what threw me. I got to do that. There we go. You know what? Let's start making this a little bit easier. There we go. Let's clear the screen a little bit. There we go. And there's a list of jobs that I have. You guys will recognize my lovely Minion backup stuff. Okay. Now you can also change things. I don't know where we are. I don't know if we're there yet. There we go. And yeah, so this is clearly just a walkthrough of the object model to show you how you can walk the object model and do different things at different levels, right? At any level, you can stop and do a for each, and we're going to see some of that here next. Do y'all need to take a break? Let's take a 2-minute break, shall we? You can pause the recording if you want to, and give me a chance to go to the bathroom and all that.
That's cool.
Be right back.
Go.
Alrighty, and I remembered to resume mine too. Okay, so now we're going to get into limiting objects, and we've already seen some of this in the last one. I hit it a lot harder than I meant to, but that's what she said. Again, everything bears repeating, right? So we start with loading the assembly because we can't use it if it's not loaded. Then we create our server object as a variable so that it has a specific type of SMO server. Now, we saw this before. SRV, .databases, I'm going to limit that, and then I'm going to pull in all of this stuff, right? Easy. We did the same thing here. I'm not going to go over that again. But what if I want to pull from a list of databases? And like everything in PowerShell and everything in coding, there's more than one way to do almost everything I'm showing you guys, right? But here, I'm just going to pull a DB list. And now this bears talking about. I always put things like this into a variable because it's so easy to change over, right? The variable doesn't care where it gets its list items. So I can easily turn that into a query if I wanted to, right? So I could do it against all the databases on the server, or I could do it against a regex list of the databases on the server, right? And then load them into here, and everything else runs the exact same. That's that whole one server script thing I was talking to you about, right? One environment, you've got one server in your entire environment, and all I got to do to make the change is change this. So if I want to do it against a small handful of servers, I probably won't do it like this. I will probably personally make it a query that queries a centralized list of my servers and just change the where clause, right? But, you know, you can switch back and forth. It can come from an Excel, it can come from XML, it can come from a CMS server if you want. I don't care where it comes from, and neither does this. So it's good practice, right? So for each one of these, I'm setting DB name equal to that object. You notice how I'm not setting DB name equal to just the name. I'm setting it to the entire object. So for this database, this object right here is going to have all of that database's properties and methods, right? So it's not just .name or .size or something like that. That would be an individual property. It's the entire object itself. And so now I'm going to limit that. We're seeing the thing from the last one come in now, right? Now I'm going to pull the tables contains servers DBO. So what I'm doing here is I want to find out how many of these databases contain this table, which is automatically pretty damn useful, right? Because there are many times that we've had to say, well, show me, you know, I need to, you know, when your boss will come to you and say, you know, show me, tell me if any of the databases on the server don't have this table or don't have this SP or something like that, right? So it's very useful to be, or better yet, you're having a hard time figuring out where something is coming from, and you have an object name, but you don't have a database name, right? So you say, well, I've got 3,000 databases on this server. Which one has the servers table? Good God, man, right? So something easy like this to be able to look through and go, oh, it's in 12 databases. Fabulous, right? I'm a little bit closer to knowing which object it is, right? So with that, let's go ahead and open this guy up. And I'm really not sure how this is going to come out. That's not what I wanted to do at all. I wanted to call it like that. There we go. So 2 of those databases have that object. Not too bad. So we're automatically being useful by limiting these objects. And I'm going to do that. And now, same thing, I think. Oh yeah, so it's the same thing here, only now I want to find a list of databases that don't have that object. So that's the negative of the last one, right? So it's the exact same code, except I'm gonna put it in parentheses and then put that little bang on the outside there, which means not, right? So which one of these servers contains it, not contains it, and then show me the database name of that one. So that one I can do, and of course I get the other 2 servers from that list because they don't have the object.
Yeah, this I really like. I think this could be really cool, isn't it? Be finding out if you've got a ton of databases and you need to know if they have the latest indexes they're rolled in or something like that. This is really, really cool.
Now I think we've got, yeah, this is the one. Now this is a really, really cool example. You're gonna like this one. Now we're gonna get a list of all of the databases and whether or not they have that table. Okay, so here I've got my database list, and I'm gonna create this empty array object, right? And I've got my DB list. I'm going to set the same thing. Nothing changes there. Only now I'm going to say exists. I'm going to create this variable, and I'm going to specifically create it as an integer because otherwise it would come through as true or false, right? Now I like 1s and 0s. And I'm going to set that equal to server databases, current database name, and whether or not it contains that table. So I'm going to take whether or not it contains that table, and I'm going to set it equals to exist. You understand that? And now we're just going to rinse and repeat. I'm going to get the size of that table, and I'm going to get the data space used by that table. So I'm going to not only find out whether or not that database has that table, but I'm going to get some table information while I'm there, right? And I could also get row count and index space and all that stuff too, right? It's endless, the information I could get from it. Now, I create a row object, which again is just another array, and I'm going to pass it in there. So I'm saying that the row column that I'm going to call DB name is going to have the value of DB name. And I'm going to say the column of exists is going to have the value of exists, which is only going to be a 1 or a 0, right? The size column equals size. The data space column equals data space. And now I'm going to take this results array right here, and I'm going to add this new object as a property, and I'm going to pass it in that row variable that I've been building, right? It's a little bit convoluted, but not once you get the hang of it. Once you do it a couple times, you're like, oh, okay, it's not that big of a deal, right? But I want to stress that these guys right here, it's not doing that so well. These guys right here are the column names. And this is the column value. So I'm building a row right here. And every single one of these represents a different column in the row. And then I'm adding that row to this object. And now at the end of it, outside of that loop, I'm going to select the results object, and then I'm going to select each one of these guys in the order that I want them, because they don't really come in a good order. So I want them in this order: the database name, whether it exists, data space, and size, and I'm just clearly just calling the columns. And when I do this, I get this really cool thing right there that tells me whether it has it and what the size and data space is. Not too bad. And of course, you can do that. You can do that for, it'd be a little more complicated, but you could do it for clustered indexes, right? Show me all the tables that don't have clustered indexes, or show me all the tables that are that have clustered GUIDs maybe, or something like that, right? It'd be a little more complicated, but it's the exact same method here, right? So I'm just, again, we're still just doing Olympics, but I'm trying to do these Olympics with stuff that's useful to show you just the power of the type of stuff that you can do.
No, this stuff is really cool. I can already start to think of lots of uses and ways it can be rolled out. That's really good.
And there you go. That's it for that one. Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and leave that one the way it is. And let's go up to number 6. I haven't the slightest idea what number 6 is. Oh, methods. We're finally starting methods. Cool. So here's my legal disclaimer, right? Don't do anything here on a production system until you know exactly what it's doing, and don't come whining to me with an email or a legal notice in any way, shape, or form because you messed something up in your environment. I'm not responsible for anything you do. I'm specifically talking to Adrian. All right, so if we want to call a method on an SMO object, what's a good place to start, do you guys think?
Load the assembly.
Load the assembly, absolutely. Yes. You can't use it if you didn't load it. Then we create our server object. Now here, I'm gonna do something different. I think that's in this one. We're gonna set a scripting options object and a scripter object, which I'm not really sure we need yet, but we'll see. Demo's kind of got away from me there a little bit, right? So we again, we can start with our GM if we want to. In fact, let's do that because GM is something else I'm just wanting to pound into you, right? Get member is your friend. It's always your friend. So here, I've got, for the database object, I've got recovery model right here. And it is a get and a set. So I can change the recovery model. And I do this all the time, right? I can get a list of my recovery models. Let's see what they are. So for all my databases, all of these guys except for TempDB are in full. Okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and set them to simple. Why not? Now, actually, while I'm doing that, I need to open up Management Studio. There we go. And I'll just let that open up in the background. So, oh, and here's something you can do. You can limit your get member, so I can get the name of just the recovery model, right? So instead of having to look through, all of them, I can just come here and say, show me just that one property, right? Okay, so now that I've got that, let's change this guy. So it's easy to figure out. Now, in SMO proper, it does this, and maybe it's the other way in the provider as well. But in the provider, you have to change it with the number, because each one of these recovery models has a recovery model ID, right? So I got used to using the IDs, and they're actually interchangeable here. But the best way to remember it is the IDs go in order from most protected to least protected. So 1 is full, 2 is bulk, and 3 is simple, right? But you can also do it like this or like that. So I'm going to set this to simple. And I'm going to try my best to uncover some of this right there, I think. Why does that have a thing right there? Oh, there it is. Okay. So I'm going to undo that. And so for each database, I'm going to set recovery equal to simple, and I'm going to print the name. Why am I printing the name? So that I'm not just sitting there staring at a blinking cursor if it takes a long time. I want to see that it's actually doing something and not just, right? Command lines are the most unfriendly things on the planet, right? So you always want to print your progress to screen. So I'm going to set recovery model to simple, and then let's go ahead and pull up the list while we're there. So I'm going to go back to console, hit the up arrow, I'm going to run. There we are, and they're all set to simple now, right? There's my list of databases, and they're all set to simple. So let's check that. Let's connect to this local box. And let's pull up one of these databases. Let's go to CDC. Let's do properties. And I don't come here very often. Is it in options?
Yeah.
It's in full. Wait a minute, didn't we just set it to simple? We did, didn't we? Let me see. There we are. Yeah, it says it's in simple. CDC is in simple. So PowerShell says CDC is in simple, but Management Studio says it's in full. Any ideas? Okay, so
Nope.
let's have a look at our get member again. It always comes down to get member, doesn't it? So when we come here and look at get member again, let's go up here to methods. And the first method in the list, I think, is alter. Now, there's this concept of a session in PowerShell, right? That's pervasive. It really is pervasive. Because our assembly that we've loaded is only available for this current session, correct? Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that there are some other session things that go on as well. And in fact, let me show you this. Let me restart this shell. Let me say restart the shell. And then come back here and run this guy again. Not like that, but let's run this guy. And when I run this guy again, oh, damn it, because I'm dumb. I got to undo this one. There we go. Do that. Now restart the shell. I is Ken Smart, I swear. Okay, now run it in the console, and everything's full. Okay, now this took me a while to figure out when I was first starting PowerShell, right? So, back to our GM now. So whenever something has an alter method, it generally wants you to use it. So there's our alter method. And you notice how it's overloaded? But we're going to call it with this one. So what happens when you call these methods is I'm changing this property, but what have I done here? I've loaded, you come back to this code right here. I've loaded this code into this session, and I've changed the properties, right? But I've changed the properties for this object in this session, right? Because I've loaded this into this session, and I've changed this recovery model. That's why this recovery model is simple, and the one on the actual server still says full, right? So if you want to push those changes to the server, you have to call the alter method. So let's do this. Let's close that off again. Let's get rid of this guy too. I did close that off, yep. And now, if I can find it, there it is. And now I'm going to call the exact same thing, only now, after I put the recovery model, I'm going to call alter. And that will make the actual change on every single one, except we want it to be simple, don't we? There we go. So I'm going to change that, and that's what actually pushes that to the server. So let's run this again. There's my list of databases, and it won't run on TempDB. So you can either leave that error there or filter it out of the databases, right? So now when I run this guy, let's go ahead and get rid of that. So now when I call this, yeah, I don't care about the scripting yet. I want to get my list of recovery models. I've got simple now, but what happens if I restart the shell? I run it, console, and now it finally says simple again, and it'll say simple in Management Studio as well because I pushed it. So the rule of thumb, there we go. So the rule of thumb is if it has an alter method, it usually wants you to use it. You're going to run into that problem with jobs too if you like go to change job owners, right? Yeah, you'll run into that problem there too. And you'll pull your hair out the first few times until you go back and go, oh, he said use the alter method. Okay. And then you'll go to use it next week. And you'll pull your hair out for about 10 minutes and go, oh, damn it, the alter method. It'll eventually sink in. Okay. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's learn some scripting. Because scripting is always really, what's the word? Handy. And sought after even. So I'm going to say that the rest of this, that a lot of this isn't really what I would call good enterprise scripting practice, because I'm trying to focus more on the SMO portion than I am on the actual scripting portion, right? So I don't want anybody writing me saying, you should put that in a variable, or you should do, shut up, I know. Okay, so I'm going to delete that. Now, to script something, and I think I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit. Let's see if I've got an actual scripting thing. This one may be better. Base path, tables, scripting. Anywho, I'll go back to methods and just pretend none of that ever happened. So I am going to, I'm looking for my script. I've got my table object right here, and we've still got all of these objects up here. So to script is very simple. You just call the script method on any of these, right? So right now I'm just going to script a single table because let's not overdo this whole thing, right? And I'm just going to script it like that, and I'm going to get rid of that for now. I'm going to script it to there, and then hopefully, let me get rid of that too. There's the name, and I'm going to open up Notepad at the end of it and view my script. So let's hope that all of this went as planned. Oops. With the exception of the fact that no, that's the right script. That's 06. That's 06, right, okay. And it went very fast, and I scripted a table, right? There's nothing to it. It's no different than anything else, not 7.6. So inside my table cursor, or my loop, right? I call that, I can easily call every single one of them, script every single one of them, right? But in Management Studio, I always hear, you've got all of these scripting options, right? You can, drop and if exists and database qualifier and all these different options you can choose, right? And you can do that in SMO too, because that just calls SMO. So they're just building SMO on the back end. So they're doing something really similar to what I'm doing in this session. So to do that, I need a scripting object. Again, here is my scripting options. And I'm going to set that as SO for scripting options. And that is, of course, again, a different type of object. And we're going to look at that object right here. Before we do anything, we're going to look at that object. So let's look at what it has to offer. And it'll bring up the thing again. Yeah. So here we go. Now, this is a scripting object for all types of objects, right? So you're not going to have every single one of these properties apply to every single type of object, right? So, for example, DRI foreign keys, that's a table thing, right? If you're scripting SPs or jobs, that's not going to be relevant. So if you set that, it's just going to be ignored, right? So this is for all types of objects. I mean, triggers clearly don't work for SPs or jobs. So, but you've got some of these interesting things that we had here, right? You got script drops and target server version and schema qualify and to file only and append to file, and you got DRI checks and clustered indexes and so on and so on, right? You can do the indexes as well. So you got all of these things that you have on the front end. Okay. Why should I bother doing this if I can do it on the front end? How many times have you gone through and clicked through all the options and gotten everything you wanted and hit go and have the thing get 98% done and stop because it hits an error, and now you've got to go do all of that again only to find it stop on a different object, only to have to go and do it again, and right? Dude, just script it. Not only that, but you can script it to do it for any database like we've already talked about, right? Or multiple databases, and you can make the structure anything you want on disk. You can put everything in a single file. You can put everything in different types of files. You can put each databases in different folders and tables. I mean, you can blow this whole thing out, right? So it's limitless what you can do. You can take something over here and put it over there, all kinds of things, right? So there are a number of reasons why it's really advantageous to do something like this. Not to mention, how many times have you gone to work and hated your day, right? The requests start coming in. I'm talking about a real production DBA, right? The requests start coming in and you just start going, Jesus Christ, I hate my day. I just hate my life, right? Because all you are is a button monkey. Now you're just going through Management Studio and you're right-clicking and you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing that and you're just, right? And everything is a drag because I got 4 databases to do this for and so on, right? Whereas with the script, you go type in the database name and hit go. Oh, good, I can move on to something else now, right? You dread things a lot less when you've got them scripted out. So we're going to set a few of these guys, I think, not in 7, in 6. There we go. So now I'm going to bring back my SO. And if you look at the scripting method in the get member list, right, you will see that it's overloaded. It's got 2 overloads. It's got one passing in a scripting options object and one that's empty passing in none, right? So here I create my scripting options object and I pass it in between the parentheses. How do I change them? It's very easy. so.script_drops equals 0. Well, you know what? Let's script the drops. And script indexes, absolutely. Script data, nope. Let's filter that out. And so I set each one of the objects. If I had 20 different things that I wanted to set here, I would just list them, blah, 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 just like I do now. I'm going to save that, and hopefully it'll run. And I just got one thing there, drop table, right? Again, with the scripting, right? With the idiosyncrasies, right? I told you that SMO was really idiosyncratic, right? Damn it, number 6, not number 7. So what I have to do here is I have to script the object drops, add it to the thing, and then I have to set object drops to 0 and then do it again, right? So I'm going to do this, uncover that, and so now I've got the same thing. Now, this is not a good enterprise script, right? We would never do that. We would put that in a variable, and I do that later. So I turn on script drops, I turn off script drops, and then I can script the rest of it. Isn't that silly? I find that silly. That's the best word I'm going to, that's the only word I'm going to use in public. And now I get the whole thing. I've got my drop, and I've got my create table and my indexes. Cool? All right, now, again with the idiosyncrasies. Let's script the data, shall we? Let's come here, wherever the hell it was. There was a script data here. Script data right here. So let's call that true. Oh, I'm in the wrong one again. So let's set data equal, because just like they do in SMO in Management Studio, right? You got the table, then you got the table data underneath it, right? So that's what I want to do here. Okay, let's give that a shot. No table data. Man, what's wrong? Number 6. So it turns out, and I'm just going to cut to the chase here, right? That when you're calling the script method, and you've got when you're calling this script method right here, and you're passing it in the scripting options, the script data property flat out doesn't work. Period. End of discussion. Doesn't work. So how do you script the data? Well, funny, you have to create an SMO scripter object. And I'm going to do that as cache S for scripter, right? And the scripter object, you have to actually pass it in the server object as well. So it has to be able to connect to the server itself. Not really sure I fully understand that, but because I'm already there, right? I mean, where that connection is beyond me. But once I do that, then I can say s.enumerate script. Now I'm in the table list, right? And so every object inside this table list is a $_ right? And I can assign $_name and get the table name and schema name and all that stuff, right? But if I do this, I get the entire object. So what I'm saying here is for every table, I want to enumerate the script. And I want to script the data. I hope this works out. If it doesn't work out, then I have a subsequent script here where it does work out. Because I've commented and uncommented so many things in here, I'm not exactly sure where I am right now. So if this doesn't work, then it'll work in the next script, and you'll see. And let's go ahead and give it a shot. And there you go, it didn't work, so that's okay. I'll move on to the next one because I've got several things done. And you know what? I'm gonna do that. Okay. So scripting data 1. Again, here we are with
Oh,
Oh, have we lost?
we lost.
We might have lost Sean.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so my box blue screened. And I'm back up and running. Okay, so we were talking about scripting data.
So, haven't got your camera up yet, Sean.
I'm sorry?
Is your camera not up?
I forgot all about that. There you
go. Lucky job.
All right, so we start off loading the assembly. Can't stress that enough. Somebody's going to tell me I stressed it enough for sure. Create my server object. Create my scripting options object. Create my scripter object, and pass it in the server object. Now this is a little bit better, right? I've got a base path set up for my file, and I'm going to build the file name, which is going to be the base path, and then tables.txt. I've really blown it out of the water here, right? I'm going to check to see if it exists. If that file exists, if not, I'm going to delete it. I'm going to grab my table list, and I'm going to set scripting data equal to 1. And then I'm going to enumerate the script and output it, and then create the name, and then do that. So with any luck, this will work it as intended. I'm on number 7 now. And there we go. So now I've got my scripted object, and I'm scripting the data. Absolutely perfect. Yeah. All right. And let's go to number 2. Yep. Okay, so this one is, you might want to separate your scripting, right? You may want to separate the scripting of your schema from the scripting of your data. So I've put the data one into a different script so that I can call it from any script I want to, and all I have to do is pass it the objects that I want, right? So let's take a look at that one as well, and that is data scripter. So here it takes parameters, takes a server name, database name, schema, table, and the file base that I want to save it into. And then at the bottom here, it does all of that stuff that already did. See here, I'm building the file name as file base schema name dot table name. I load all my objects. I think I've pounded that into the ground already. Getting a database list, a table list, and in this case, it's only one table, right? Because I'm passing in that table name. So I'm going to call this script for every single table. I don't have to. I could create a version of this where I just pass in the database and it does all. But who wants to script data for every single table in a database? That's usually not practical. That's why I did this for a single table. Now, so nothing has changed, right? I get script schema false, script data equals true, and then to file only equals true. For each S in scripter.enumerate list, I'm going to output to the host, and I'm going to write it to a file. So I'm going to be able to see all of the lines of data, as all the insert statements as they come across, right? And I can call that script from anything because it's just taking parameters. So here in this one, everything stays the same. I'm going to put a date at the top of the file so that I know when the file was generated, putting it in a comment right there because it's going to be a SQL file. Script drops, yes. Script if includes or if not exist. And I'm going to script the schema, or I'm scripting those things right there. Then I'm going to script the schema by setting these guys to 0 again. And then I'm going to call my data scripter and pass it in the current parameters, right? So server, database, schema, table, and file base. So for every single table I call this for, I'm going to call this and pass it in there, and I'm going to have the objects and their data in individual files. but I could also have the object schema and the object's data in different files or different folders if I wanted to, right? So when I run that, I've got all of them scripted out. Got all of them there, and if I go to that folder, I can't believe I didn't open up the file at the end. Go to my DBs, and there it is right there with that and all the data. Now, if you wanted to do a ton of data, right? This is for scripting data when you've got a fairly small amount of it, right? But how would you do it if you wanted to do, if you got like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of rows? I personally would do BCP, right? And I've got a great video up on Midnight DBA about how to run BCP from PowerShell.
Yeah, funny enough, I was going to say, how does this compare performance-wise against BCP? So it's
BCP will outperform this many times over. And the cool thing is you could do this a number of ways, right? Now, I wouldn't want to do this, but the method is there, right? The capability is there. That for each one of these tables, I could check how many rows they are, and if they're over a certain amount of rows, I could do BCP, and if they're under a certain amount of rows, I could script out the insert statements like this. That's, again, that's kind of stupid. It's impractical, because then you have to kind of know how to do the same thing on the way back in, right? But it's possible. So you see how flexible these solutions are. They're incredibly flexible. And I could take this data scripter and add everything in there. So instead of having this script these guys and then call a data scripter, I could just flip the bits all in one thing, right? So I could do it all from a single script. But I wanted to show you how to do it from two different scripts. And if you want to separate the functionality, it goes more along the lines of the object-oriented programming where every class has a specific function, right? So this function is that it scripts the data, right? This function is that it scripts the schema and the options, and this one scripts the data. So anyway, it keeps things a little more separated. And one thing I didn't show you was in here, since it's a SQL script, now I know when it was scripted, and it's done as a comment too, so I'm not going to mess up the SQL. So there you go. That's the end of my beginning SMO lesson.
very, very cool. Thank you for doing that. That's been really interesting.
And I know my family's going, yada, 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 yada.
No, it's been good. So, yeah, thank you very much for doing that. It's, yeah, my head's blown.
Yeah,
Lots of thoughts rushing around now that I'm thinking.
I hope I pounded in the basics enough, because that's what I really wanted to do, was explain the basics so that you could, because there's no way I can teach you all of SMO, right? But if I teach you those basics, then you can be more than workable, right, with just a little bit of practice. And of course, we're going to make these scripts available to everybody, right?
Yep, can do.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send them.
Email them through to me, and I'll pop them up on our GitHub, and I'll post them on the blog, so it'll be there.
Okay, yeah, there's no secret to any of this, so yeah, I'll be happy to provide the scripts. That's why I put all the notes in there, so that, you know, when they download them, they can see some initial thoughts on there and see the thinking of it, right?
Yeah, that'd be cool. So, yeah, so they'll go up on our GitHub site then. So there should be a URL on the screen right now that'll point you where that is. So yeah, that's cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on again, Sean. It's been a good one.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been on for 3
found it
hours.
really interesting. Oh, we have, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's been really interesting. I've a lot there for me to be thinking about, and hopefully other people now understanding the SMO and PowerShell and how it can be applied a lot better.
Are your guests usually as never shut up as I am?
You're our first guest we've had, Sean, actually.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. We normally just me and A talking nonsense for an hour or so. So it's
oh well, then I'm glad I set the bar.
We might have to make more of a habit of getting other people on as well.
Absolutely.
So, thank you very much again. And,
absolutely, man. All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Cheers. Thank you.